Hey, welcome to the show, everybody. It's Wednesday, and that means it's time for another episode of the Leadership Toolkit. As you know, your definitive leadership growth podcast. It's an opportunity to tune in, listen in, take a peek into leaders from all over the world. At this point, I've had all kinds of amazing guests, all different backgrounds, all different industries, all different verticals of business, and different perspectives. I think we've got a really diverse and just well-rounded group of men and women and people that we've had on the show to have conversations about what works in leadership, sometimes what doesn't work in leadership, right? What are the successes? What are the failures? We'd be remiss not to talk about the failures. Like, that's how we do. We fail forward, we stumble forward. And it's, you and I have all heard it said, if you're not failing sometimes, you're not trying hard enough. So today is no different. I have an absolutely phenomenal guest. I have Jeff Oak from Vistage.com. He's got a 35-year business career. He's had the opportunity to lead major turnarounds, drive growth in market share and profitability, manage multi-million-dollar mergers. He is a successful family man, a successful leader, and I am stoked to bring to you today Jeff Oak. Jeff, welcome to the show. Welcome to Leadership Toolkit.
Thanks, Mike. Really delighted to be here with you.
Thank you so much. And I can't tell you enough. I know I said early on when we were chatting a minute before, I just really appreciate your time. I know you have so much stuff going on, and as leaders, we get so busy. It's that constant bombardment of things going on in our life. So the fact that you're willing to take some time and slow down and have a conversation to be able to help others grow and navigate through that, I just think is phenomenal. So thank you.
I love doing this, Mike, and I love the work that you're doing.
Thank you.
Through all of your different channels.
Well, if you would do me a favor and let's set it up a little bit, Jeff. Share, who you are, what you do, what's your background in leadership and management and business and growing people, and just lay it all out there in the 3 to 5 minute elevator pitch.
Sure, yeah. Thank you, Mike. So I like starting with my why, not the what or the how, but the why.
Okay.
And my why, my purpose, is helping leaders to step out of their comfort zone, to step out of what's familiar, and achieve both success and significance for their organizations, their communities, and for themselves. That's the most important thing. The way I do that, the majority of the time, is serving as a Vistage chair. And I'm going to talk a little bit more about that in more detail. But leading peer advisory groups for leaders, doing executive coaching with them, bringing to them external resources that provide very rich perspectives to really grow as leaders, exactly what the focus of this podcast is.
Oh, that's fantastic. So if you would, I want to get into something here for just a second. Thank you for sharing that, Jeff. When you're saying, hey, I help leaders, and what you said was you help them step outside of themselves, I guess, so to speak, to find
what's
success.
familiar. Yeah, what's familiar and comfortable.
So if you're helping other people find you said, hey, that's your why. And so obviously you're helping others navigate and find theirs. How did you arrive at that point? How did you discover what your why was? Is there something, can you take me through that a little bit, Jeff, of, okay, hey, here's now what I know what I need to do. And then what's the approach to just start to chase after that? Cause I like sitting, watching you and out in podcast land, people are like, man, that guy's got it all together. But I think that's one of the things, even for myself, that people often struggle with in leadership roles. We get this predefined notion of, okay, well, here's what I'm supposed to do, but there's not instructions on how to find it.
Yeah. So I do want to come back to the common struggles that leaders have, which your comment brings to mind for me.
Sure.
But I've always been a kind of a mission-oriented guy, a purpose-driven person, and so many mentors have helped cultivate that along the way. I've been very, 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 very blessed, very, very lucky to have people who have modeled what being purpose-driven and other-centered and servant leadership really looks like. The bulk of my career was actually in nonprofit healthcare, actually faith-based health systems, where that was modeled. We had to compete with publicly traded companies. We had to be every bit as good as all of our competitors, And we had this other dimension, which was really about strengthening communities. We wanted to build strong communities, and we did that through a variety of things that we did. So that's really been hardwired in me for a long time. And my role within those healthcare companies was serving as the chief ethics officer, which was really about helping the organization stay true to its own values, its mission, and its purpose. And I was fortunate to work for some wonderful companies. And every role that I had, I either reported directly to the CEO or to the board chair.
Mm-hmm.
And I was fortunate to have large teams. And I discovered about midway through my career, even though I didn't really think of myself as a coach, that's exactly what I was doing about 80% of the time. Developing people, helping them realize their truest self, their most authentic self, their best self. And when my healthcare career wrapped up, I was contemplating what's next for me. And that's when Vistage found me and I found them. And it was a wonderful match for me. It gave me an opportunity to impact the few who influence the many. So that's the thumbnail sketch of how I got to doing what I'm doing.
Oh, that's really good. And I think it's always good. It's one of those things, and I'm hearing you say this, and if I'm reading too much into it, I always tell people, look, just correct me. But it's one of those that when you get in alignment with yourself, you're like, hey, I've got these core values. I've found this. I'm headed the right direction. It's I think it's a Tony Robbins quote where he says, "Where focus goes, energy flows." Right. So if that's what focus is, that's where your energy is directed. Your comment was, well, Vistage found me, right? Well, that's because that's what we're open and looking for, and so were theirs.
Yeah, very, very much so. It was a very happy connection with Vistage. We work primarily with small and mid-sized companies. I was a big company guy, and sure. I was working with companies that had tremendous resources for employee development or leadership development, and I really took that for granted. And what I've learned from the small and mid-sized companies that I work with is that they don't have many of those resources. And Vistage provides a very critical source of outside perspectives, insights, best practices, and the like. And I'm able to bring the rich things that I was fortunate enough to be the beneficiary of during that 35-year-long career, and bring that to the leaders that I serve.
And just to clarify, and I think you said this at the onset, but Vistage, in a nutshell, you guys do executive leadership coaching, CEO coaching, that sort of. So like that's the background, just for the base for everyone, because I think we jumped right in and started talking about it rather than just talking to it. Just to so one thing, because you are afforded the opportunity through coaching executives, coaching CEOs, coaching high level leaders. I always find it fascinating and interesting to have conversations with guys like you, Jeff, because you have so many different influences, both coming at you, and then you're sharing your perspective on how to move and grow and build people and companies. I'm curious, because you alluded to this and we talked a little bit about it. What are some of the most common leadership struggles? The stuff that is, and I'm talking that affects the person at the startup with maybe a few people they employ, all the way up to that big CEO that has several hundred or 1,000 people that are answering to them. What do you see as a common thread when it comes to leadership struggle?
Yeah, I really see 4 threads, Mike, as I've worked with the CEOs that I work with. One of them is a sense of isolation. Many leaders feel like they're carrying the burden of responsibility on their shoulders alone. And they have very few people that they can share their challenges with. So a sense of isolation is quite common among the leaders that I work with. A second thing that I see, a second thread, if you will, they often feel misunderstood and underappreciated. They work their tails off. I mean, a lot of my members, they're working, 6-7 days a week. We're trying to move away from that to get some balance in their lives. but they don't understand why people can't see how hard they're working, which often creates friction in their relationships. And so strained relationships is another thing that I see when they don't feel understood or fully appreciated. A third thing that I see is that highly driven leaders have very high expectations of themselves, and they've achieved an enormous amount, yet they feel like they're falling short. So there's a sense of dissatisfaction and self-doubt. They may present as highly confident, but they often have self-doubt. And we often refer to this as imposter syndrome. They're extremely successful, but they believe they're there by luck, or they don't deserve it, or they don't have what it takes. And so that dissatisfaction, self-doubt is a third thread that I see. And the fourth thing, which really is a natural following, is what I'll call slippage. A lot of very senior leaders, very accomplished leaders, often let important things slip through the cracks. They often don't take good care of themselves. They often don't sleep well, don't eat well, don't take time for exercise or much of a social life. They feel exhausted, burnt out, and often depleted. And those are the struggles that I see most common. And I'll pause here to really get your feedback and thoughts. And then
Sure.
I'd like to talk about how Vistage very strategically and directly addresses these struggles through the integrated platform that we have.
Sure. Well, as you're talking about this, it's like you've looked into my head at certain
I,
times.
I was wondering if you were hearing a description of yourself.
I was concerned if I should come back or not. Well, I mean, because you end up, and I am a firm believer, Jeff, and you and I seem to be on the same page on a lot of stuff. Leadership can be taught and it can be learned. And there are certain people that have a predisposition for that. And through, like, as I'm listening to you speak, just speaking for myself, because I don't want to, tap anyone else on the shoulder or make it where someone thinks, oh my gosh, now he's talking about me. I've been in that situation. Part of it is because I love the study of leadership, that often in businesses I've been involved in, I move into some level of leadership role, middle management on up to management, so on and so forth. And you beautifully illustrated, because the four things that you said, and I always try and recap so that I make sure I've got it for my audience to tune in and listen. What you said: sense of isolation, they're misunderstood, especially from the work ethic level. They have high expectations of themselves, and imposter syndrome. I did a whole video on imposter syndrome about a year and a half ago, because it's the same thing. I was questioning myself. Like, you start saying, well, who am I to share this stuff? Like, who am I? I mean, and then that slippage, I was like, listen, you can't see a lot below the chest level on the podcast, but there's a little slippage in the waist area for myself. So I think, and the interesting thing, because the way I framed the question, I said, hey, what are the common threads? Like, you could see it at any level of leadership, somebody moving into middle management and learning to lead, to somebody who may have been in a just phenomenal role for 35, 38, 40 years, that is for all intents and purposes, on the outside looking in, you're going, oh my gosh, they're crushing it. They're such a good leader. Oh, I'd follow this person anywhere, and so forth. And on the inside, they've got all these things just eating away at them. And I think, it's just human nature. I think we get into leadership roles and we put a lot of that weight, people that move into management and leadership, like, we put that weight on ourselves. Yeah. I imagine you've been there. You're like, oh my gosh, now I got and for people that are the best leaders, I'm going to say this, the people that are the best leaders are not title chasers.
Yeah.
However, once they get the title, I think that there's a certain level of commitment to that they're like, well, now I have to be this thing.
Sure.
And these four things creep in.
Yeah. And let me be clear. These are threads that not only I have recognized in myself, but I have lived through or lived with myself. So, I'm describing, you said you felt like I was describing you. Well, these are things that I struggled with.
Those are the things that have the biggest impact on us, are the things. I mean, if for anybody that moves, whatever role, if you're in sales, marketing, leadership, you put together widgets or whatnot, it's one of those things you start to see in that role that you're in, the role that you are actively pursuing each day, that those are the things that you have the experience in, right? That's what reveals itself. It's like, well,
Yes.
the reason I know that is because, gosh, I'll never forget this. I remember a good mentor of mine, I work with him still in the auto business, but he always used to say when he'd be coaching leaders, he's like, just remember, if you're pointing the finger at somebody else, telling them what they should be doing or what they didn't do or any of those things, you have 3 pointed back at yourself. So just keep that in mind.
Yes,
Okay.
I love that. Yeah.
So yeah, if you would sort of, and those obviously aren't the only things. Actually, before I go on, this is just how my brain works. And we're 15 minutes into the show. One thing I want to point out, and I've had this on the screen several times, for anybody that may be listening on the audio podcast, certainly if you're watching on, you're watching the video on Spotify or YouTube or whatever platform you're choosing. I've had this on the screen a couple times, but I want to spell it out for anyone tuning into the audio. If you want to connect with Jeff, because this is just lining up to be a phenomenal show. This is going to be a good conversation. It already is. But you can connect with him on LinkedIn, linkedin.com/n/, it's just Jeff Oak, JEFFOAK. So you can find him there, reach out and connect, maybe send him a note so he knows where you're coming from. And then certainly we've talked a lot about his company, Vistage, that does executive training, leadership training, CEO training, management, that whole, is it primarily C-suite people that you're training and counseling with?
Yes. And okay. It's leaders as what we have 6 different leadership programs. So it's the different levels of leadership,
gotcha.
From the CEO down to a young emerging leader.
So vistage.com is VISTAGE.com. And then Jeff had mentioned, we were talking beforehand, for listeners of the podcast, I'll leave some links in there. He'll have some bonus content and bonus items for you. Yep. So a leadership assessment, you'd mentioned there's sort of a 90-minute members only podcast. So there's some exclusivity there. If people
that's chock-a-block full of leadership content.
Good. So for anyone, well, I'll have that in the links for the description, both YouTube, Spotify, all the podcast platforms and so forth. Yeah. So before we move past this, when you're talking about, leadership struggles and leadership challenges, it's one thing to talk about them and say, well, hey, you feel isolated. Hey, you don't feel good enough. Hey, you're misunderstood. That sucks. Do you have some advice? How can somebody overcome that? If they start to feel that sense of doubt creep in, if they start to get, for myself, where it shows is I get easily agitated because I'm like, nobody recognizes what I'm doing. I'm so awesome and I'm doing all this stuff and I'm working so hard. If someone notices, because I think good leaders too have a good sense of self. So if you notice these things are creeping in, what is the Jeff Oak method to overcome some of that stuff?
So let me step back. Great question, Mike. Let me step back a little bit.
Okay.
And give some context.
Okay.
So one of the things that leaders that I touched on, the very first one, was the sense of isolation. We call it, it's lonely at the top. That for many of us leaders, we feel alone. And we've gotten to a level of leadership because we've been high performing. We've delivered on promises and goals and that sort of thing. And that individual sense of capabilities will get you so far. But once you're in leadership, individual capabilities alone are not sufficient. So that takes me, I'd like to walk through the 4 basic elements. There are actually 12 dimensions of Vistage, 12, we call them domains of value. I'm going to talk about the 4 themes that bring all those 12 elements together.
Before you do that, you said 4 themes that get those together. I want to touch on something you just said, if I can jump in here for 1 second. Because you said often in leadership, it's our individual capabilities that get you there.
Yep.
But it's not the individual capabilities, in a sense, that can keep you there.
Correct.
And I want people to
what got you where you are won't get you, in many cases, won't get you where you want to go.
God, that is so true. I just pick up on stuff like that sometimes, that it's like, it's so simple and yet so profound and powerful. And I want people to, I always encourage people, when you listen to a podcast, seek that value, right? And take some notes. So that's a really good nugget right there, Jeff. It really
Yeah,
is.
yeah,
So,
yeah.
okay. So what are the four?
So the
areas?
first domain of value is the peer advisory groups. I lead 4 different groups of leaders. They are all peer groups, but the individuals within each of those groups is different, because one group is CEOs of large companies, another is CEOs and owners of smaller companies. A third group are C-suite executives, so they're reporting to the CEO. And then my fourth group is a Vistage group inside a company. Everybody in that group is from the same company. And the genius behind peer advisory is that it brings together leaders from diverse industries and backgrounds into a non-competing peer group in a confidential forum. And what happens, people share insights and experiences and challenges. I had one of my members who said, when I'm running my company, people think I know everything about everything. What they don't know is that some days I'm just making it up. He says, I can go to my Vistage meeting and say, I'm just making it up, folks. I don't know what I'm doing with this problem. Can you help me out? Can we give you your perspective? And so the very first and most powerful element of Vistage is that the leader is not alone. The leader is part of a group of peers in a supportive environment, and an environment of accountability, which is the second dimension, is that woven into Vistage is the hardwiring for leaders to set goals, to track their progress, and hold themselves accountable. That's shot through with everything that we do in Vistage. So that accountability and support is the second domain. The third domain, which balances out the peer group, with all of the leaders that I work with, we meet once a month for a full day meeting in the peer group. And then I meet once a month individually with each of them. It is private executive coaching tailored to their challenges and problems. It is a place of vulnerability, a place of turbocharged growth as folks work more intensively on their personal goals. And then the fourth element is that we bring into those peer advisory group meetings subject matter experts on every topic imaginable relating to running a company, managing a company, owning a company, selling, buying, merging. And we have subject matter experts on it all. They help leaders, those subject matter experts help leaders stay ahead in a rapidly evolving business landscape. Imagine, I don't know whether you took chemistry lab or physics lab, where you're making mistakes with other people. There's a teacher, but the teacher's not doing the work for you. The teacher is guiding you through the experiments. Our Vistage peer advisory group meetings are a bit like learning laboratories. And the outside expert speakers bring in external insights that people utilize to work on their company in real time.
No, I think that's awesome. So I want to repeat this one too, because I'm sitting here a lot of times I put my guest on the screen, one, because you have that value and it provides the opportunity for just to be able to share your wisdom. Because a lot of times if we're both on the screen, I'm sitting thinking, and I've heard it said, like, if I'm thinking of my next question or response, I can't possibly be really hearing and taking that in. And so I sit here and we'll take notes, and that's where I'll hide out a little bit. So you said it's 4 domains of value. That was how you titled it. And across the 4 of these, one thing that I want people to hear when you're listening to this show, sometimes you got to hear between the lines, hear between the information. The one common piece here is that covers all 4 of these domains of value is you have to be deliberate in doing these things. There is no, so it's one of those, like, for you, Jeff, if you're coaching someone, you're getting them involved in your ecosystem or Vistage's ecosystem, and saying, okay, hey, here's what we're going to do to start. Because the question, this all led from the question of, okay, well, how do you overcome those 4 struggles? How do you overcome being isolated? How do you overcome, you know, that imposter syndrome, not feeling good enough. And obviously one of the things you have a plan and you came right back with is, it's like, okay, well, first people got to acknowledge it, then they're deliberate in seeking the help in each of these. And then you're saying things like, well, you have a peer advisory group. You can't be isolated in a group of people. I mean, I guess you can in your head, right? But
Yeah.
the reality is you're putting people into these groups deliberately to be able to have other high level, high performance individuals to be able to bounce stuff off of. That's sort of the, what is it? Napoleon Hill mastermind group sort of idea.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so then secondly, you said, okay, you got to create accountability, support, goals. Again, that takes time, energy, and taking a step back, physically sometimes, mentally sometimes, taking a step back to really sit and work on the things, because we get so tied up as leaders running companies and running so fast that you're constantly leaning forward, you're constantly leaning in. And sometimes you need someone to tell you to just say, hey man, grab a slip of paper and take a step back, and here, we're going to work on that. Something as simple as that.
Yeah.
The third one you said was sort of the one-on-one accountability, which is not as you said, that's not as often as the peer groups, right? But
that is the peer group is once a month, and my individual coaching with each individual member is also once a month.
Gotcha. Okay. I'm forgive me, I missed that. So you're you know, equally now you're funneling down to say, I guess that creates a place where, for a high level leader, for somebody that's performing and you're expecting to lead others, one of the things I hear on that piece is you have somebody else that will help manage you by agreement. First and foremost, you're making sure they show up. The agreement is, hey, I'm going to show up for this. Do you have something to add to that?
Yes. We actually have 12 operating agreements.
Okay.
And at each meeting, we take one of them. So I just concluded my July meetings. The 7th month of the year, we talk about the 7th operating agreement.
Okay.
And I'll just read, some of them are things like,
I'd love to hear.
Be prepared and intentional. Be a student and a teacher of leadership. Be bold, set high goals. Be genuinely curious. Be present in the meetings.
Sure.
My favorite and most important one, actually, which opens up to a whole bunch of other topics, is check your ego at the door.
Oh, yeah.
Make the group a safe place for everyone. And so if someone is missing meetings, or when they're at the meetings, they're not fully present, they're checking their phone all the time, they're hopping in and out, and they're not fully engaged, we'll talk about that. And we're not going to embarrass people, but in Vistage meetings, stuff gets named. Hey, Jeff. Hey, Mike. Notice that you seem pretty distracted. What's going on? You want to talk about it? And that level of curiosity, the level of asking the question. When I'm talking with potential candidates for the group, I'll say, my job is not to answer your questions. My job is to question the answers that you give to me and to the rest of the world. And by doing that, to ask questions that nobody else is asking you. And that's a regular occurrence. I'll hear people, whether it's in the group meeting or in the one-to-ones, say, hey, Jeff, nobody's really asked me that before, or nobody's ever called me on it. And I have a lot of members who call me their professional caller out of their BS. I have one guy, he always says, I love the fact that you call me on my BS. And you're the only one who does, because the people in his company aren't going to do that, right? Because it's the boss. But in a peer group, with an objective group of leaders, with a facilitator like myself, people aren't afraid to name what's going on, or to ask the question that the rest of the world, that CEO spends his or her time in, that no one else is asking them.
No, that's really good, because I do think, and one of the, you're absolutely right. There's a couple of things I gained from listening to that. One is, often the people in the company, and I've asked people this, I've been in coaching situations, I'm running the organization, I'm doing the stuff, and I'll look at my staff members or my direct reports, and maybe I'll ask them something. Hey, we're trying to grow, we're trying to move forward, we're trying to do this. What do we do here that's dumb? And everybody, first off, nobody answers because they're
Yep.
like, wait a minute, I don't want to tell that guy or that gal what we're doing that's dumb, especially what if it was their idea, that I'm hurting their ego.
Yep.
And so a lot of times people will clam up. But you're absolutely right. When you're in a peer group, now I'm looking at this person eye to eye,
Yep.
and they're on the same level. And so I agree with you. I think it's really, really valuable and strong to be able to look at someone and say, hey man, you're screwing this up, and here's why I think why. And a lot of time, do you find it hard sometimes to break through that mental shell of, hey, you'll look at somebody, and you may even, you said, hey, I've got the CEO that looks at me and says, I love that you call me on my BS. That's the end result.
Yep.
What about the initial time? Because as leaders, as strong leaders, managers, I've heard it said that normally your manager is your strongest salesperson because they have to sell the rest of the staff on their processes and their way of getting things done. Well, if that's the case, we're selling ourselves on why we do things the right way. So do you find it tough to break through that sort of shell or that mentality sometimes?
It's a great question. And we have a way of doing things that just puts that in the sights and goes after it. And let me describe a little bit of it.
Sure.
What I hear you saying, what really resonates with what you're saying, is that where there's no trust, there's no growth. That CEO has to trust me trust me enough to that I can call his BS. First time I met him, I didn't call stuff out, right. But there was a relationship. The way trust is developed in a group is through vulnerability. And we model that vulnerability at every meeting. And the stories that I could share about the things that people have openly shared. And here again, I hear in group meetings and in one-to-ones fairly regularly, on a regular basis, I've never shared this with anyone. I've never admitted this before. And I model that as the chair, as the facilitator. I share pretty routinely mistakes that I've made, struggles that I have. And when you're with a group of people and somebody goes first, others generally follow. And when folks don't, that's when I get curious. That's when others get curious. I've noticed, Mark or whoever, I've noticed that you haven't really shared anything yet, or I noticed that you seem a little reluctant to be open. What's up with that? And we do it in a respectful manner, but we do it in a direct and intentional manner. You talked about intentionality. We are vulnerable by intention, because when people are vulnerable, it unlocks neural pathways, both in the one who's sharing and in the others, and opens up creativity and ultimately builds the trust that you were alluding to, Mike.
So I want to expand on that. I want to dive a little deeper on it. First off, when you're saying vulnerable, I think you and I are on the same page. I want you to expand on it. And just, what do you mean by vulnerability?
Let me give you one example.
In a business setting, or in this setting we're talking about.
I will give one example, and this is public. The individual, it was not public when the person shared it, but the individual has since shared it. I have a CEO who came to this country from another country, and en route, his mother was shot by the security forces of the country from which he came. His mother spent time in a hospital in the country that they were traveling through, and he was 7 years old at the time. Came to this country, didn't know a single word of English, lived in the South Bronx, which is an extremely challenging place to live. It's like a war zone in many respects. Lived in public housing, was on food stamps, and it was an extraordinarily difficult time. And I knew that about this individual.
Sure.
But nobody in his company did. They knew that he came from another country, but they didn't know his backstory. He sent me a text the Tuesday before Thanksgiving several years ago, and it was telling his whole story about his childhood and the obstacles that they dealt with and growing up in the Bronx and in the South Bronx and all the rest. And his challenge, he shared it with the entire workforce, 450 employees.
Wow.
And his message, he was modeling vulnerability. This is a guy who's not inclined to vulnerability at all. He's a survivor.
Yeah. Survivors, they got to put on that tough exterior shell. And it's like, this is what you see, this is what you get.
Yeah, he said, I'm challenging my managers to share something that they're grateful for, something personal. And his message to me was very simple. He said, I never, ever would have shared this were it not for Vistage. I think you call it vulnerability. That was the message. That was it. That's an example. And that was such a powerful self-disclosure that people understood the boss as a human being.
Yeah.
Who has gone through incredible challenges. That's a very dramatic example, but it's the kind of stuff that happens when you build trust in a group, when others are modeling vulnerability for each other. And I have members now who say, this is my Vistage meeting is my favorite day of the month, because I'm just real. I'm myself. I tell people I have no idea what I'm doing in the face of this problem. And when people share, that is the catalyst for others to share. That's the climate and the culture that we create in the group.
I love the manner in which you share that, because I think it's something that again, I think we can have some different sort of views of vulnerability in business, and the best way you sort of could wrap that and put a bow on it is just simply it's having that real human moment.
Yeah.
Here's the struggle that maybe people didn't know about me, but I'm going to lay it all out there.
Yeah.
So that leads to another question. Do you, Jeff, think people can be too vulnerable?
Certainly, there is a time and a place. And I think in order for vulnerability to have the kind of impact that it can have,
sure,
there needs to be a baseline of trust. There needs to be some norms about safety and about honoring what people share. And I'm sharing a dramatic example of a disclosure in real time, a real disclosure in real time. But that doesn't just happen out of nowhere. There is a progression of self-disclosure. And I'll share something personal. We have, one of our children has a very, very severe chronic brain illness. And I initially didn't share that with many people. And what I discovered is that when I shared it with one person, they said, you know what? I haven't told anybody this, but I have somebody in my family who's dealing with the same thing, or who has struggled with that. And I've shared with the group about that. I didn't share it the first time I met them.
Sure.
There had to be a level of trust built,
right?
A level of confidence that things will be held, confidential. But the reason why it's relevant, in my case, the reason why that's relevant is that caring for my family member who's dealing with an extremely devastating illness, it has made me a better person. It has made me a better leader. And that's the relevance. It's not just sharing for the sake of sharing.
That's it.
But sharing with an objective, in the case of Vistage, to help us become not only better leaders of our business, but better leaders in our families, better leaders with respect to our friends, better leaders in the community. So it's not sharing for its own sake, but sharing to accomplish a purpose of building a trusted, in this case, a trusted peer group where others can feel safe, sharing things, and they'll be confident that what is shared in the room stays in the room.
I think that's really powerful also, is it's one of those that we always in our meetings, one of my the owner of our business of the auto dealership that I work with, he always says, he says, look, this is not the Pentagon, so we don't have leaks to the press.
Yep.
So I think that's a powerful statement. And that I do like, that's what I was getting at too, is I think that's very well said, Jeff, is like, you're not sharing just for the sake of sharing. You're sharing with a deliberate purpose. You're sharing with it, because I think vulnerability, especially in leadership, it can become, I've had a few really strong leaders on the show, and they say, well, here's why vulnerability is powerful. Again, it's one of those, if you ask 100 leaders what the top 5 characteristics are in leadership, you're going to get 600 answers, right? So, so I've had a few people that have really leaned into that vulnerability piece. And I do think, you said it really eloquently, like, you're sharing with a purpose, you're sharing for a reason. It's not just a buzzword so that I can be mushy with somebody and try and attract folks. It's because, hey, I want to share this piece of me because I have a trust for you. And here's this deliberate reason, lesson, learning from it. And it's not sharing to seek counseling or just because you heard I should be vulnerable on a podcast somewhere type of deal.
Yeah. And here's a little secret about being a chair.
Yes.
I recruit CEOs for the peer groups that I lead. And then at the first meeting, a human being shows up. Surprise, surprise.
Yeah.
And that human being has a story. That human being has blind spots. That human being has stories in their head. Some of those stories are empowering. Some of those stories are self-limiting. Some of those stories enable them to be a better leader. Some of those stories and beliefs and the internal stuff is preventing them from becoming a better leader. And what we're about is unlocking the person of the leader so they can channel the best version of who they are. And in some cases, some leaders, they don't know who the best version of themselves is. Mm-hmm. They're trying to realize that. And I have CEOs that I've been working with for 4 years. The first group that I launched was 4 years ago, and I have original members from that group.
It's awesome.
We've shared a lot, and I know we share a lot. There's the connectivity. I had one guy at our last meeting. He got news as he was walking in that a family member unexpectedly died. And
it's terrible.
I could tell that something was wrong. And at one point in the meeting, he nodded for me to look at my phone. Our phones are, we generally keep them, face down, but he kind of nodded. And he said, I just found out that my uncle died. He said, I need to be here. I need to be in this room. I need to be with my family, my Vistage family. I'm going to try to hold it together. If I start talking about it, I'm going to lose it. But I need the material that we're talking about today. So I respected that. And then at the end, when the meeting was breaking up, he said, hey, I just want to let you know what happened. And then he immediately broke down. Yeah. And the powerful comment was, this is like a family for me. And this is the place I needed to be on the day that I learned about this. Really, really cool, really powerful stuff.
That's really strong. Thank you for sharing that. Thank you very much for sharing it. So a couple things I want to hit on. One more question that you had on our email exchange before we're done today. A couple reminders for everybody that's watching. If you're watching on a video format or if you're tuned into the audio podcast, I would encourage you. And I mean, I've thoroughly enjoyed the conversation so far, Jeff. So I'm sure
I have
others
as
have
well. I have as well, Mike. It's mutual.
If people want to connect with you, go to linkedin.com/in/Jeff Oak, JEFFOAK. And then certainly if you're interested in finding more about leadership coaching, leadership assessment and evaluation, that podcast and such that we were alluding to earlier, you can check out vistage.com. It's VISTAGE for more info and to connect there. And like I said, I'll share some links to be able to connect to that in the description of the show, in the show notes. So one thing I want to get to, because we've had a lot of different conversations. You've shared some really, really valuable information, Jeff. One question I keep coming back to, because you sent me a few. You said, "Hey, we could talk about this, and we could talk about this." And so people know out there in podcast land, I have very limited conversation. Like I like to know even beforehand, and Jeff would edify this for me. Like we have conversation about who we are as people. We don't get into this because I try and save the content for the show.
Yeah.
But I keep coming back to this question because one of the things that you said is the best leaders are humble, hungry, and smart.
Yeah.
And so humble, hungry, and smart. And I initially, that's an easy statement to agree with, right? It's like, well, sure, that makes sense. And you've got a bunch of different bolt-on components depending on, who puts something else at the center of the pinnacle. So can you expand on that? Why do you say the best leaders are humble, hungry, and smart? And is one of those more important than the other two? Which one's the most important, or do they all complement and help each other equally?
Thank you. And actually, when I'm talking with potential candidates for my group, this is what I'm looking for. Is there a level of humility? Is there a hunger? And is there a smart? Let me just say a word about what each of them is. And by the way, this trifecta, I've adapted from Patrick Lencioni. So let's give him credit for it. C.S. Lewis said that humility isn't thinking less of ourselves, but thinking about ourselves less. And it's all about checking your ego at the door. It's about getting out of your own way. It's about celebrating the accomplishments of others, not just one's own. And I'm going to come back to that first element. The second element, hunger. That's hungry in this sense is people who go above and beyond. They're always looking for more. They're looking for the next opportunity. They're looking for the next potential, and a certain hunger, a hunger to grow, both their organizations and to grow as leaders themselves. And the third one is smarts. This is not book smarts. It's one thing to be clever. It's another to be wise. And what I'm really looking for is the kind of smarts. It's really people smarts. It's reading a room. It's being able to sense the effect that one is having on a group. And being smart, I once heard someone say, is a little like wearing underwear. It's important to have, but you don't have to show it off. And so humble, hungry, and smart is what I'm looking for among potential members of my groups. And there is one that comes before the other, and that's humility. If someone doesn't have humility, it's going to be really hard for them to create a team culture, a team environment, a collaborative way of working, because it's about them as individuals, not about the flourishing of the group in its totality and the flourishing of the individual members of that group. It's about them. So that's the one that's kind of a rule out for me. If I get the sense that someone can't leave their ego at the door, I'll say it's really been great chatting with you, but I really think this is not a good fit for you.
No, I think that's totally fair. I mean, it's very simple: humble, hungry, smart, right? And I've heard it say, you've said several times, check your ego at the door. I used to work with someone that he always compared it to. He says one of the best things that leaders can do for themselves is bruise their ego.
Yeah.
And that stuck with me, because it's like, that is really what it is. Like, I mean, even for myself, a certain level of ego it can be healthy, right? Certain level of, well, I shouldn't say ego, confidence, right? There's a fine
Yeah.
line on that, confidence and ego. But if that's a part of who I am, for me, sometimes it's tough to just check it and leave it behind, but I can sure punch it right in the throat and
Sure,
and
sure.
and take one to it. So
I mean, every member of every one of my groups has a strong ego. You can't
sure.
lead others if you don't have a level of confidence, a willingness to step out and take a risk, and an important capability is just setting that to the side.
Yes.
And there are some people who just can't, they just can't. Well, this is probably not for them. At least not my group.
Yeah, I can say too, that's something for myself, and I didn't even realize I was doing it, but that's something I struggled with for many years. I finally had somebody that cared enough, and I will say it that way, that actually cared enough about me, said, "Hey, you've got all these great qualities, but man, your ego is overwhelming
Yeah.
at times." And
Yeah.
it was, that hurt. I mean, it really did hurt, because I'm like, I'm just doing the best I can to lead people and coach people and do this and do that. And um, I didn't listen to it well at first
Yeah.
either.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. No, I think the kind of self-disclosure that happens in our meeting, challenging others, questioning, there's, over time, I think that makes it difficult for someone, if they're in the meetings and they're paying attention. It makes it difficult for them if they've got residual, like, I can't set my ego aside. It chips away at that. And the
sure.
way I like to think about it, and I share it with my group, when we're having a tough conversation with someone, I'll often say to that member, look, the truth will set you free, but first it'll probably make you miserable.
Yeah,
And we're here about the truth, your truth. We're not doing you a favor to withhold from you the truth that the group sees, because when you see it, you'll be on a journey. You'll become a better leader. You're going to be miserable first, but ultimately it'll set you free.
absolutely true. I got one last, and this may or may not be a small or large question. One of the things you brought up earlier, and I want to come back to this too. I highlighted it. So before we part ways today, you talked about, right before you got on there with Vistage, you said one of the things you realized is you'd become a coach.
Yeah.
And since you're in a position now that you are coaching people, certainly the easy answer, because I'm going to ask, well, okay, so if I'm looking for a coach, if I'm a CEO, I'm a leader because I'm feeling isolated and some of these other things, and so I decide, okay, I'm going to look for a coach. I want somebody to connect with. The easy answer is certainly they can check out vistage.com.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
However, can you expand on it a little bit? What should an individual, a leader, a manager, somebody that wants to grow, could you give me a couple or three characteristics that somebody might be looking for in a good coach?
Great question. And that is a big one. Well, that coach does also need to be humble, hungry, and smart.
Okay. Love it.
And I think confidentiality is absolutely critical.
That's a good one.
I think for executive coaching, I was and all Vistage chairs are pretty vigorously vetted, and there are certain criteria that we need to meet. There's several hundred hours of training every year that
Oh, wow.
we as Vistage chairs receive. We're not just putting out a shingle and say, hey, I'm a coach, but there's just
Sure.
very extensive training and vetting. And I think one thing that is important to me, and I've seen this in the people who have been my coaches and mentors. Yes, I help leaders solve the problems in their businesses, but my real job is to coach the person, not to coach the business. And here's why. if the person at the top doesn't change, the problems in the organization will come back. So you can't coach the business. You got to coach the person, because the person is the one who shows up. It's the common thread.
Yes.
I've had one member who said, I've made all these mistakes. What's the common thread? And I said, well, I hate to break it to you, it's you.
Yeah, you started the sentence with "I've made." Well, there you go.
Yes, yeah. And again, I would never say that in a cavalier, casual way, but I'd say it respectfully. And I'll often ask people, look, I'll say permission to speak freely, or is it okay if I say something that might be hard to hear?
That I think is really, really valuable. I think so often we jump in as leaders, as coaches, and we say, hey, let me give you this advice. We haven't gotten permission sometimes to give them that advice.
Yeah.
Just that statement of saying, hey, can I speak real frankly with you right now?
Yeah.
Because 99% of the time, probably people, if they know you and trust you and you have a relationship, they go, well, yeah, of course. Gosh, Jeff, of course, you can speak freely. And you're like, okay, here it comes.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I think there's a certain artistry to delivering difficult news. Sure. And I think preparing the individual that the news you're about to share with them might be difficult is a gesture of respect.
Absolutely.
Absolutely. And so I think sometimes people, they plow ahead, they're proud that they're brutally honest. I'm not sure that is not a compliment in my book, being brutally honest, being respectfully honest, and being able to deliver the feedback in a way that optimizes the likelihood that they're going to hear it. If I give someone feedback and they're not ready to hear it, you know what? It's going to in one ear and out the other. You got to earn the right to give someone feedback. I actually might give very little advice. I give lots of perspectives. I ask lots of questions, but I have so many different companies from so many different industries. I can't possibly know all that needs to be known about all these industries. Sure. But what I can do is listen very, very carefully. And even if I don't understand the business or the industry at any great depth, again, I'm coaching the person. I'm listening to what they're saying and derive the questions that I think will take me and them to the core of things. One of the greatest compliments, one of my members gave me is that, Jeff, he said, Jeff, when I talk to you and you listen, I can hear myself think. And I took that as a huge compliment, because that's really my job, to help him, help her think more clearly about what they're facing. And so I treasure that. I treasure that.
That's so good. It's so good, man. And it just going back, I would encourage anybody, write that down. And I love these human moments, Jeff, that it's not a canned, oh, well, you got to just have, here's these 5 things or these 3 things and so forth. When we're having these conversations and people that listen to the show, you need to hear this and you need to write it down. And because the question is, I said, well, what are the key characteristics of a good coach? What's somebody you should be looking for? So if I'm out here, I'm listening to a show such as the Leadership Toolkit, and I say, hey, okay, yeah, I'm looking for a coach. Of course, the easy answer, I interview people that are coaches and offer that. And the easy answer, Jeff could say, well, just go here and sign up for my book, my program, and so forth. But the reality is, he said, well, look for someone that's humble, hungry, that they're smart, that they'll be confidential. I think that is so powerful. The fact that they're not just going to go share your news all over the internet and, oh, I was coaching so-and-so. And then like the confidentiality piece, I don't think sometimes people realize how valuable that is. Yeah. And then that final tidbit, and I know you expanded on it and said it far more eloquently than I ever could, was that you're coaching the person, you're connecting with the human and growing the individual. That's where everything stems from. So it's,
if I could close with this.
Yeah, absolutely. Please. Yeah. Please. I was just going to ask for closing thoughts. Here we go.
Yeah. Your comment brings something up for me. Coaching is a very it's a very intimate kind of conversation.
Sure.
Where people are sharing stuff that they're struggling with. And one thing that I've learned is that you can't push people, you can't push them willy-nilly when you're coaching them. You have to know when to hit the gas and when to tap the brakes, when to push them to do more and when to encourage them to do less. And there's a certain artistry to that. There's a certain artistry to that, and I'll just leave it at that. But yeah, people need to be pushed, but they need to be pushed with intentionality and with respect and with a recognition of what it is to be them and what they might be struggling with.
Absolutely. What a wonderful way to take us out. And as a reminder for everyone, first off, Jeff, thank you so much. I was joking before the show. I said, we got 3.5 hours of time. I literally could have a conversation with you for that long. You're very easy to talk to, very knowledgeable. And so I've really enjoyed this.
Yeah. I have as well, Mike. Thank you.
Thank you. So reminder for everybody, again, you can connect with Jeff on LinkedIn. It's Jeff Oak, JEFFOAK. You can check out, if you're interested in diving deeper into him coaching or their coaching environment, vistage.com, vistage.com. Thank you so much to Jeff, my new friend and my guest today, for joining me. I appreciate it. If you would do me a favor and just hang out for a minute, and I'm going to go ahead and take us out. Okay.
Sure.
So ladies and gentlemen, that is going to bring us to a close for another episode of the Leadership Toolkit. Thank you so much for taking the time to tune in and join me. I encourage you, connect with Jeff. I really mean it. I love conversations like this because it's just easy. It's free flowing. Jeff knows what he's talking about. He's talking about, coaching and going through, what are the pitfalls? What are the struggles that a leader has? What are some domains of value that you can be pursuing as a leader to be able to grow and break out of some of those things? I mean, we covered a lot today. We really did. It was just a great conversation. So I would encourage you, connect with Jeff. Do me a favor as you're tuned in and listening to this show. If you're watching it or listening, whatever platform, please throw some thumbs up, throw some likes on it. That's one of the ways that this podcast continues to grow. And certainly, most importantly, share it on your platforms. I always ask that. That would be super awesome. I would really appreciate if you would share this on whatever platform you're watching or listening on. But most importantly, if you know somebody that would gain some insight from listening to a show like this, you go, man, I know so-and-so person, they really need to hear what Jeff had to say. This person needs to hear it. Then just share the show with them. So you got to listen to this one. So often we'll hear something and it's great, and we go, wow, that was really good. And then we keep it to ourselves. The whole point of the Leadership Toolkit is to impact not just yourself, but to help grow your circle, help grow the people around you. That is the biggest blessing that you could offer to me, and certainly to your circle of friends and your circle of influence. So thank you, everybody, for tuning in and joining me today on the Leadership Toolkit. Until we speak next, stay great. See you next Wednesday.